All right, so it's 2 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to get rolling here. First, I just want to thank this month's sponsor. So every month I have a sponsor for my free newsletter, Electric Speed. My sponsors also get shout outs on Twitter and shout outs here in my free monthly sessions. So this month's sponsor is Kingsman Editing. They've actually been a sponsor for more than a year or two now. They sponsor me a few times a year. You can learn more about their editorial services at kingsmanediting.com. Thank you to Kingsman. And for those who are interested in sponsorships, there are still some available in 2023. All right, so about Sarah, I've actually known Sarah for quite a number of years now. Currently, she is working as a nonfiction editor and writing coach, but you have a very long resume as a professional writer. You've done business writing, corporate writing, media writing, consumer writing, like it's
entertainment writing, yes. A lot of entertainment writing.
And I think, I can't remember what our first consultation was about, but I'm pretty sure it related somehow to your book, P.S. I Love You More Than Tuna. And I had I got to experience part of that journey with you, the wonderful journey of seeing that book come to fruition, landing a book deal, releasing, and all of the other wonderful things that happened. So Sarah reached out to me with the following dilemma, and I'm just quoting her right from the email she sent. She says, "I want to begin teaching, but I have no experience teaching. It reminds me of the actor's conundrum of needing a union card to be cast, but needing to be cast in order to get a union card. How do you build your first course, or how do you gain experience teaching?" So Sarah, I'll let you jump in here and just elaborate as you wish. You can talk more about your background, things that you would like to do in the future.
So thank you, Jane. And I don't think the whole tuna thing would have been much more difficult without you. So I really appreciate all your support around that. I've been book editing since 2008. And in 2020, when my gift book came out, I gave myself 2 years to kind of decompress and stabilize my income before moving on to my next project, which is based on a blog I've had for a while called Living the Mess. And Jane, I think our first conversation was about how to build a platform for a cat book that also showcased my writing and the approach of living the mess. So we're 2 years away and I've stabilized my income, and I love editing. I love working with my clients. And I also want to start building a platform for living the mess by writing articles. And I'm turning it into a newsletter rather than blog posts. And so teaching would be a great way, I hope, to do that. And the other part is something you once said to me. You know, I know that my fees are high, and I would like to be able to help more people who can't necessarily afford my one-on-one services.
Right. Yes. Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my slides. And probably the most important thing as you get started, before I describe some of the nuts and bolts of doing your first class or presenting or finding an opportunity, is you need something delicious to offer. This is kind of analogous to if you were writing a book or pitching an article, the content itself has to be compelling or look good, or whoever is on the receiving end, your idea or concept or whatever it is, it has to stand out. Certainly I know my background, at least on the writing and publishing side of teaching, is from Writer's Digest, where I spent many years, and we got lots of pitches, as you can imagine, for people who wanted to teach at Writer's Digest. And, even before we knew anything about the skill level of the person, if they had teaching experience, I mean, usually the first thing you're engaging with is what they want to teach. And I would definitely recommend, before you approach any organization or business, that you have something specific that you want to offer under their umbrella, rather than say, I want to teach for you how about it? I think you want to have a definitive idea that you think is going to work with, their audience and with what they're known for. So with that in mind, a lot of success rides on this thing that you're going to be pitching. And before I talk about developing that, I first just want to touch on why people are motivated to take a class, because sometimes I think we don't really, we're so in our own head that we don't think about the people that we're serving. So what I've observed is that people want to improve their work or their lives, their personal lives. They want to learn a skill or maybe a mindset. They're looking for behavior change or even transformation, or they need help solving an intractable problem. And certainly when I think about developing new classes, I'm always thinking about what's a problem I keep noticing and keep helping people with, and they're still not overcoming it. And so a lot of my classes just are very problem oriented, resolving this particular problem. So with that in mind, indicators you have the makings of a class, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts, Sarah, on what you want to teach. But I think, especially people in your position, when you're editing for clients for as long as you have, you tend to see the same problems again and again, and you tend to write the same guidance again and again. I know, for example, Allison K. Williams, she actually has a huge, I think it's a Scrivener file that's chaptered by all of the advice that she gives to clients, about prologues or dialogue or scene changes, and she's just, because she gives the same feedback hundreds of times, she's just already got it written and ready to go. So
I have
ahead.
I have boilerplates
Yes.
that I customize. I'll go back and find what fits, and then I'll customize it to the client.
Exactly.
And their project.
Exactly. So that copy paste file or boilerplate stuff, that is that to me is the compost pile, for your classes. This is where you can draw ideas and fuel. Okay. So also, especially if you're blogging or in any sort of public position where you're talking about a topic, you tend to get asked the same questions over and over, and that's also good fodder for thinking about the direction of a class. If you've already been writing and pitching, delivering advice or guidance in written form, whether that's for an online outlet or a print outlet, that's an indicator of which direction to go in. And also, finally, if you're just known or associated with fixing a certain problem. And Sarah, I know you focus primarily on creative nonfiction, memoir. I don't know if you do much or any fiction editing, but in any event.
I don't.
Okay, so.
I just figure I haven't written fiction in 20 years. And I think there are many editors who are just better than I am at editing fiction. And I like nonfiction.
So let's say we were brainstorming what you could teach and thinking about what is going to be most likely to get a resounding yes or enthusiastic response. If we're thinking about someplace like Writer's Digest or Creative Nonfiction, which host countless classes during the year, if I were on the receiving end, there's some okay ideas here on the left. If I'm just going with memoir, people tend to go for really general and broad, which can be okay, but usually you need to be a big superstar, at least in the writing and publishing community, to do
Marion
something.
Roach Smith.
Precisely, that's exactly right. A Marion Roach Smith or a Mary Carr, or to do these really broad ranging.
Stephen King.
Yes. Or a masterclass, if you go to masterclass.
Oh, yeah.
Is it Patterson? I don't know if he's done a masterclass. I think he might have. I think
so.
On how to write the novel. So but it's really hard to pitch that as someone whose name isn't known. So on the right-hand side, I have things that, especially for a place that's offering lots of classes, this would also apply to conferences that run every year. They have to find new ways to say the same thing. or new packages for evergreen content. And so on the right hand side here, I have some, the really common issues and problems. It's very focused, like people struggle with the dividing line between fact and fiction in memoir, and how much liberty can you take and like making up dialogue that you don't remember from 20 years ago.
Right.
Or, what if you upset your family members when you write your memoir? How do you deal with that? How do you write a memoir when the events you're writing about don't necessarily have an ending yet? Like your life is still going. What makes memoir sell in 2023? That would we know that it's difficult to sell memoir, but what about current trends or which way the wind's blowing? So it lends specificity and urgency. And then finally, but I don't remember how to handle memory gaps in memoir, which is another big problem. So, once you start, like anyone who is regularly accepting or hosting classes, they're probably aware of what the pain points are. And so when they see something that really nails a problem that they've observed with their audience, they're just going to have a much more immediate and enthusiastic reaction, regardless of what your experience level is, because the idea itself indicates what you're talking about, that you've engaged with this audience long enough to know that they have this problem. So I'm going to throw it back to you now.
Okay.
And putting you on the spot, can you identify a problem right now that you often help writers solve?
There are two that come to mind. The one that I think I wind up repeating almost with every client is how to bring the reader into the room with you, and really create an immersive experience on the page. And this kind of dovetails with the other one, which is I work with a lot of journalists and academics who are working on their first commercial nonfiction book. Mm-hmm. And their training is, almost the polar opposite of what they need to do for a commercial book. So those are the two. I'm not sure I have a specific thing with journalists and academics. I don't have a punchy title, like how to bring the reader into the room with you. But I would say those two. I also am really interested in process. And again, this goes back to, can I tie what I teach into living the mess? And I tell almost every client, yes, but in chair time is absolutely important. You can't publish a book without sitting down to write and revise the book. But what we do before we sit down to write, in my experience, can make a huge difference in how each writing session goes. So that would be another idea, but that's more what I'd like to teach and not necessarily what people need. I don't know.
That's an important distinction, hugely important distinction, which I think a lot of people struggle with. There are things that they really wish people would learn or know or understand, and their class is structured around that. Sometimes the frustration you have with people you're trying to help. So like you've identified, these academic writers or journalists need to bring people into the room with them. That's your way of describing it.
Right.
It might work well when you're with the client one-on-one, but as a class, it's going to have a hard time getting interest because they don't speak that way, or they don't know what that means, or they don't know what the benefit is. Right. They don't know what problem it solves. So you could still convey that in the class itself, but you would have to package it in a way that's compelling.
I think this is a little too vague, but the topic that came to mind is what academics and journalists need to know when they're working on their first commercial nonfiction book.
Yes.
And that also lends itself to like, here are 10 points or 5 points.
Yes. This reminds me a little bit of what I believe Laura Portwood Stacer does. So she's written a book called, I think it's called The Book Proposal Book. and it's specifically for academics, for professors and people who might have a little bit of trouble writing a book proposal or pitching because they're too in the weeds of their own field, or they're trying to turn a dissertation into something that would be a book. Dissertation isn't necessarily a book, so they have to be
right. At least
to.
commercially, yeah.
Exactly. The reason I bring her up is because I think she is a great example of someone who's carved out a niche for herself. She's really well known for that angle. And I think that helps tremendously when you're just getting started. So, I'm not saying that you should, just double down on talking to academics or journalists, but it's something to think about. Where do you feel you can carve out a unique space for yourself where you're immediately the first name that comes to mind when people are dealing with X?
I have to say, I love working with memoirists, but I also want to differentiate, as you were saying, carving out a niche. I kind of feel like I think Allison is watching. Allison Williams owns memoir kind of at the moment. So, I don't want to be trying to do what she does because she's brilliant. And
well, I think, as someone who hosts obviously a lot of classes myself on all sorts of topics, Allison teaches on memoir with me. So does Dinty Moore. So does Lisa Cooper Ellison. So does some other new folks that are coming in 2023. And I think it's helpful to have different perspectives. Everyone tackles topics in different ways. So I certainly wouldn't exclude you from teaching memoir, because there's always going to be other people teaching on the same thing, but you'll have your own style or voice or aesthetic, or some people like Lisa Cooper Ellison. I feel like her positioning is often more like Zen Buddhist. So there are different flavors, and people like different approaches, and they like to learn from different people. So anyway, just trying to offer some reassurance.
Okay, so that maybe I can get on that slate down the road.
Okay. So all of this work that we've talked about so far feeds right into your marketing description, as well as whatever pitch you're going to be sending to whomever you want to teach for. And right here, I've just got a little brief screen capture of the next class coming from Allison K. Williams on second drafts. And, you can tell, this is the other thing about speaking in the language of the person you're trying to help. You can tell from the bullet points and from the word choice that she understands what people are struggling with. And she also adds in some really concrete ways that people are going to be helped, or they're going to have their thinking changed on some issues. So for instance, there's a bullet point here about what theme is and how to bring out the themes of your story as you revise. Tip, it's not the moral of the story. So she's like hinting at how, how you might be challenged, or how your position might change on certain issues. And, people are generally after that transformation or change in thinking. And so you shouldn't be afraid to show how you're going to push against people's expectations. Okay. I added here on the slide, make the writer feel seen. Usually this description is all about making people feel like you understand the problem they have. And once they feel understood, they're like, okay, I might trust this person to actually resolve the issue.
Yeah.
Okay, so the other thing I would recommend as you're planning your first course or courses is to think about what are the big secrets or aha moments that if things go well, you think this is what people are going to share or talk about, or they're going to tell their friend, oh my God, you gotta go take this class, or you have to hear what she has to say because this was just amazing. It's usually, I find it's a handful of points. Even if the whole presentation is excellent, there are usually a handful of things that just are really, people get really impressed by. And so it's going to be different for every person, every class, but you'll want to think about what are those moments where people are just like, this changes everything for me. And it helps. Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that is something that with my clients, I mean, I often say with memoir, like, you're telling me this like we're talking over coffee or I'm standing in the hallway. Can you bring me in and let me look through your eyes and hear through your ears? And is this a variation on the bringing us inside the room?
Yes.
And that's the one that people seem to go, wow. And I have to say that was a piece of advice from my very first editor for my first publication in a lit journal. And it has served me so well now with clients, and they kind of go, oh, wow, I get it. And then they return their menu, like the next version is just beautiful.
Yeah.
So that's one that comes to mind.
Perfect.
As an aha.
Yeah. So I think, again, to repeat what I said earlier, your interactions with clients, are going to provide you with so much feedback or information on what that is. I think it's harder, in my opinion, it's harder for an author who might have a lot of knowledge or, about what works or what doesn't and has something to teach, but they're not avidly working with other people on those problems. And so they don't necessarily know what's really going to, turn the light on for someone.
Yeah.
I think it's also useful to know, and this just comes from experience and time in your community, what your audience already knows or says or passes around about the topic, so that you can just avoid saying the same thing that everyone else has always said. So like a common theme for me is, if we did a whole class on the hero's journey to help someone avoid plot problems, that would probably fail, because everyone has already heard about the hero's journey a billion times. And so they feel like they have nothing new.
I'm covering my eyes because that was one of the first conversations you and I had.
People are like, what else you got other than the hero's journey?
Yeah. Although I will say not many nonfiction writers have. I have a post on my blog about how to apply the hero's journey in nonfiction. And I've had a number of clients say that that's how they found me.
Okay. So,
but you're right.
Yeah.
I totally.
I'm not saying you can't, like, this is just this tiny, tiny example. You can absolutely reference the hero's journey, talk about it, use it as a model, but you would not want that to be, your big, let me show you what the hero's journey is all about. It has to be in the context of some other thing you're trying to get across, or you're twisting it or shining a new light on it. And I'm
also solving a problem with it.
Exactly.
Rather than just saying, I mean, it goes back to what you were saying earlier, that it's not about what I know or what I want to share, but it's about what clients and people who aren't clients need to know or are struggling with.
Yeah.
As much as I want to teach what I want to teach.
And then the last point here, I think it's very useful to think about who the class really isn't suited for, who it's not going to benefit. And I like putting this in the class descriptions. It just helps set expectations. And I think it's also really good discipline when you're teaching to understand that not everyone is going to be helped by what you have to say.
Right.
And it also helps you think about, now, is this for beginners or beginners to intermediate? Is it really for advanced? And I mean, I have to say, there can be an issue here where people don't correctly self-identify their level of skill.
Yeah.
But still, you can at least do your best to indicate how knowledgeable someone's going to need to be in order to get something out of the class. Okay. So just to go a little bit more on this, because I think this is where a lot of people fall down. Most people know in the writing and publishing community about shitty first drafts. They know about the difficulty of getting memoir published. They've probably heard at some point that memoir needs to include the universal, whatever that is. So in a class, especially when you're pitching the value of it or what problem it's going to solve, you want to go further, like how to know when a shitty first draft is the wrong approach. Like, again, pushing against people's ideas or expectations. looking at memoirs that secured publishing deals in the last year that aren't by celebrities and why, if you're doing a business session, or, hey, let's forget the universal entirely because thinking about that is too abstract and confusing. Instead, let's apply the ABC rule, which I think is what maybe Marion Roach Smith, that was her aha moment for people, which I love that. I send people to that ABC post all the time. If folks don't know about the ABC rule, just Google Marion Roach Smith ABC and you'll find it. Or is it XYZ? Now I'm forgetting.
I can't remember.
But you go ahead.
I sent out a newsletter last week and asked people what types of courses they'd like to see me teach. And the response I only got one response from it, was kind of, what do you do between a shitty first draft and a developmental edit? How do you know you're ready for a developmental edit? So that's, I don't know if that's not specific enough.
Say that again, because I was busy putting a link into the chat. Sorry.
So one of my newsletter subscribers said, what do I do before I get a developmental edit? What's between shitty first draft and a developmental edit?
Yes.
And I thought that was a really good question.
Wow. Yes. Something like that I can envision a session, which I did run at one point with Tiffany Yates Martin about, I think it was called Get It Edited, which is all about how do you know when to call in an editor? What sort of editing do you need? So yeah, I think that's definitely an issue that could be addressed in a class, although I don't know if that's too narrow, but you could certainly have a class focused on developmental editing generally.
Right, and what it is.
Right. How to make sure that you're getting an actual developmental edit, what they look like, how they differ from other types of editing, and so on.
Yeah. I often say to people that a manuscript evaluation is like 20% of the level of intense feedback that I would give in a developmental edit, and it's 20% of the cost too.
Yeah. Okay. Just catching up a little bit on the chat. I see Allison active there, which is, thank you, Allison, for joining us. Let's see. Okay.
I want to look at the chat, but I'm afraid it'll make me self-conscious, so I will at the end.
I can send you the chat file afterwards.
Okay.
And just to clarify, folks, it is the XYZ rule. I got it wrong. It's not ABC, it's XYZ. Okay.
The alphabet rule.
The alphabet rule. Okay, so here's another big, I think this is one of my aha moments for this session, is that successful classes focus on how. It's not about why or what. I mean, I made this mistake rampantly in my early classes. I talked about the importance of platform and why you need it and what it is, and talked about it very abstractly and conceptually. But it wasn't until the last few years that I really showed people how to build one, like tangible steps, tangible examples. People really, really need the how. I remember, this has been maybe 2014, 2015. I vividly remember having a conversation with Tim Grahl, who at the time had some really elaborate online classes surrounding book marketing, which I often sent people to. And he said, I learned very fast that people do not want to be taught book marketing strategies. It looks like my video went off. Hold on. There we go. People do not want to be taught book marketing strategies. They want to be taught tactics. So like, take it to the keyboard, advice, actionable tips. So I feel like I sneak in the strategy with the tactics, but I focus mainly on the tactics.
So what if I framed, this is more a process than a craft thing, framed it as how to get the most out of butt-in chair time?
Maybe. It sounds nebulous.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, get more what, or maybe.
Right. how to write better, faster by, I have a post that I would love to turn into a class called The Law of Increasing Flow, which is kind of tongue in cheek, because it was kind of, what does the opposite of the law of diminishing returns look like? Because we all know what it's like when you're sitting there for 6 hours and your brain just starts going, eh. So
it sounds like it might be some sort of, do you think this is like a mindset sort of class? Or
a mindset, and I mean, the practices tend to be around mindfulness. It's about what to do, before each session, to take the time to get centered. It's not going from like 5 different social media posts down to writing, but it's going for a walk or meditating or exercising. Things that kind of, we all tend to live in our head a lot, that bring us down into the body.
I see,
which is very different. Go ahead.
No. Well, I was just going to say in the chat, some folks are mentioning that Becca Syme, who's I think pretty well known, has something on Write Better Faster. I think she does a lot of classes and books related to that. And Renee is saying, I'd love practical tactics for writing faster. So even though it might not be your intent, Sarah, to help people write faster, that might be the benefit or the positioning of it. Or
that's something I've always struggled with, is wrapping my head around the marketing side of it rather than just saying what it is. But you're absolutely right. That is the benefit.
Yeah. Okay. So I think this is the last little tip I have related to preparing something that people will be enthusiastic about and that will be received well. And that's especially for writing and publishing classes, examples.
Yeah.
And it's true no matter what medium you're working in. So this could be a book, an article, a class, doesn't matter. But if you're teaching someone, how to have better dialogue or how to have better transitions or whatever it is, you've got to have examples. So it can be from published work. That's often easiest. I think it can be from client work too. Obviously, you need permission to show that. It's really valuable to have before, after, original, revised, improved. Obviously, you don't want to be, if it's client work, you do not want to be shaming or
No.
And I know you would not do that, but that's not, I just want to make it clear for everyone listening, that's not the intention here. It's to show, here's where you're at, you might be at currently. And with the techniques I'm showing you, this is how you'll improve it. So since you're an editor actively working with clients, I imagine you would have
there's a lot of before and after, and I think people would be open to me using it.
Yeah. Usually I find clients tend to be, unless they feel like they've got something on submission and it might, I don't know, there might be some issues with a reveal too early. Usually I find people are very open to having their work shared. All right, so getting your first gig.
As always, Mark has chosen amazing images. You might have chosen these.
These are slides. The slides are all mine. So, but Mark does.
Well, great job.
Mark does choose images for the blog. It's true. So I would, if you've never done it before, if you haven't sat down, if you're planning to teach online, I should also add that preface. You need to record yourself teaching your ideal class. So you need to put together the slide pack. And I have a separate class on better slide presentations. You may have seen it already, Sarah, but I'm saying it for all of you who are wondering how to do an excellent slide pack. Go to my YouTube channel. You'll find my recommendations there. So put together your slides. You'll have to think about having a professional setup. And by professional, what I mean is you need to have a reasonable webcam. It could probably be the one that's built into your computer. You need to be at a decent angle. So you don't want that weird thing where you're kind of like looking down into your computer.
Right.
If you need to buy lighting, buy it, or you may have a really just a good nook with, usually you want, the ideal scenario is have a window to one side and a window in front. That gives you the best possible lighting naturally. Most people are not that fortunate. So you buy a light, like a ring light, I think costs you like $100 if you need it. And then you'll need probably, I mean, if you're really serious, I would buy a decent mic. So that could be like a Blue Yeti. It's a good starter mic. It'll get the job done. If you don't want to invest in a mic yet, even Apple's earbuds, the ones with the microphone on the wire, those actually sound pretty good. So if you have a set of those can work before you invest in a microphone. So once you record yourself, and you could do this using whatever technology you wanted, you can even use Zoom actually to record yourself doing stuff. You could, trying to think of other tools I've used. I think I've used ScreenFlow, but these days I just open up Zoom and record myself in a meeting by myself.
I'm great at speaking to myself.
Good.
Like perfect. I've got that down.
You'll want to lightly edit the recording. Like you'll want to trim the tops and tails. You'll probably want to put in some like little like intro slide or something that, fades into you starting to speak.
Can I offer something here? Mm-hmm. I didn't mention that I also used to write for TV and was a TV producer. So one of the things I learned is that when I start recording myself, I give myself a 3, 2, 1. And that way, when I'm editing, I know where the in is, and same at the end. I did that for Tuna for Meow Fest. Mm-hmm. I recorded a few videos. So
okay,
that's
excellent.
what I was thinking.
So you already have some skills with this. I see that Loom is being recommended in the chat for being a good private recorder.
What's a clacker? Oh, a board.
Oh, a clacker, yes. So once you've got your class file ready to go, I would upload it to YouTube with a private link or Vimeo, whatever service you use. I mean, you could make it public, but what I'm suggesting is you want to have this ready for whomever you're pitching, because if they've never met you, if they haven't seen you teach, if they just don't know what your skills are, you need to be able to show them.
It's like an audition monologue to go with the acting.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. So it's even better if you can get a recording of a class where there's interaction, like you actually have attendees and people can see you engaging with the audience. But if you're just starting out, that can be tough, although I have ideas that I'll share. But I think bare minimum, you'll want to prepare something like this. Got a question about what my font is, and I don't know, Stacy, what font I'm using, but I will try to figure it out when we get to the end. I do know it's from an Apple template, so if you use Apple's Keynote,
it looks like Helvetica.
It's probably
or
Helvetica.
Arial.
Yeah, one or the other.
It looks like the same as the opening credits for the Apple series Severance. That's what.
Drew is wondering what I use for video editing. And I mean, Mark, my husband and business partner, does all of the editing at this point for videos. He uses Adobe Suite to do all of that, but there are lots of lighter weight editors that you can use. I have to imagine Loom allows for some light editing. You can, if you're a Mac user, you can even use QuickTime to do some light trimming. I mean, I wouldn't do in-depth stuff with it, but it can do some quick jobs.
What about iMovie?
By all means.
Okay.
I've used iMovie before as well. Yeah.
If I don't want to splurge on Final Cut Pro or something.
Right. Yeah. No, don't go to Final Cut Pro. If you aren't already into the Adobe suite, I don't know that I would use Premiere. That's their video editing software, because it's just, I mean, it's massive, right? It's for professionals.
Yeah.
So, for something like this, those are really heavyweight tools that I don't think are merited unless you're already familiar with them. Okay. So it does help hugely and I speak from experience, to teach the class in person first, and maybe for free. I mean, when I got started teaching, it was all in person because I'm old and there weren't really online classes that were video driven. And so I practiced by doing a lot of free stuff in connection with Writer's Digest, teaching at libraries and bookstores, being a guest in college classes, continuing ed programs, a lot of local and regional writers conferences. And I think those are great places to get practice in, especially if you're not going to have any expenses, because you're not likely to be paid much, if anything.
Right.
It's going to depend on the conference, of course. Also, chapters of national writing organizations, often they have monthly meetings, and they're always looking for guests, people who have something specific and helpful to teach. So I find that they tend to be very open. And the purpose here is simply to hear what questions are getting asked, what people's concerns, worries, anxieties are, where you're getting pushback. You'll identify gaps in the material, you'll figure out what's confusing the heck out of people, and you can remedy it. So I just think in an online space, if you're teaching a class for the first time online, it is hard to read the room.
Yeah.
And it requires multitasking too. Like even I'm not as talented as Allison Williams at monitoring the chat and the Q&A and presenting. I tend to stay fairly focused on the teaching, but since I've taught so often, I tend to know where the confusion arises or where there's going to be lots of questions, and I can take a little break and look at the chat and the Q&A. When I first started teaching webinars, this was in 2009, 2010, I found it very challenging, just because talking to a screen with no feedback coming at you is disconcerting after you've been teaching in person. You're like, is this coming through? Like, I have no clue.
Yeah.
But Sarah, have you done anything in person at this point?
Not in terms of the stuff I'd be working on or teaching now. I've co-led workshops at one point. Yeah, I don't know that that's relevant. I was a strategic storyteller for a company that did branding, and then I wrote what they called, one client said it was a business plan that read like a novel. It was the best job a writer could have. But that involved kind of leading 3-day workshops and helping people kind of extract their vision and think creatively. So I've been up in front of a room before, but I haven't taught specifically in person.
Yeah. So everyone's different, but I would say I think it's generally more comfortable to start in person with the material. But that said, work it whatever way will get you started. So with that in mind, if you start online or virtually first, my advice pretty much remains the same, because bookstores and libraries are continuing to run virtual programs. The regional chapters, a lot of them now run regular Zoom sessions or meetings. I've been guests at chapters of RWA, MWA, Sisters in Crime, SCBWI, and some of these organizations have dozens and dozens of chapters. So there's lots of opportunities. Any ongoing free series that has guests or seems to be open to having an outsider come in and share a little of what they know. And I have Writers Bridge in here, which is hosted by Allison K. Williams, and I'm going to be a guest there early next year. The other thing I would suggest doing, and maybe you already subscribe to this, Sarah, is to subscribe to another Sarah's newsletter, Sarah Nicholas, because every week she compiles free and paid virtual events. So that would probably give you a lot of ideas for where to go and who you might partner with.
I don't subscribe, but I will.
And Allison has very helpfully put that link into the chat. So thank you so much. And Allison mentions that even teaching to one person online can help. She tests new webinars with a writer buddy who asks questions and notes what's not clear.
That's what I was going to ask is, can I test it with people I know who may be working on projects?
Yes.
Rather than strangers.
So that leads me to, my next point here, which is, do something interactive for free or paid on your own or with some trusted friends, colleagues, clients. I feel like I've noticed a lot of people, they get started with what I would consider small group coaching. So like you've got 4, 6, 8, maybe even 10 or 12 people that you're meeting with on a regular basis. And it's kind of an in-between of a class discussion and coaching. Yeah. And that can be super useful. You can host a Zoom session like this one. And I think this is webinar mode, but meeting mode works fine, assuming it's small and you don't mind people, being on camera and talking, which you'll probably want at this stage anyway. Yeah. I know you already reach people, so you could probably gather some folks to do that with you. Social media, I think too, is very useful for very quick tests and experiments, because you can go live very quickly on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, or your place of choice.
I've done that, but it feels a little like diving into the water for the first time. Like, yes. And I know it's fine, but it's still like, nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I hear you. When I did that briefly, like at the very early, was it the early stage of the pandemic? I can't remember, but there was at some point where Facebook was really pushing doing live videos. And so I did a little bit of that, and I wasn't a huge fan of it, but I think it was well received. But I felt like I needed someone to help me keep track of the chat and the comments and the questions.
Yeah, that's a big issue for me, is having things steal my focus.
Yeah. So again, the goal with any of these options is just to work out the kinks, anticipate questions, work out the problems, and you become better at learning what people need to hear and expressing it in a way that they'll understand. So as you make progress, I don't think this is required, but once you start doing these presentations, free, paid, privately, publicly, you're going to want to add a dedicated page on your website for teaching or speaking. Certainly when I was at Writer's Digest and working for other organizations, if someone was pitching me kind of out of the blue, I didn't really know them, the first thing I did is I went to their website. And certainly if instructors approach me, I immediately go to their website and see, okay, what are they promoting themselves for? What do they have experience in? It tells me so much about whether I want to work with that person. So I think it's tough, though, to have a dedicated page for teaching and speaking if you have no testimonials yet, or you can't point to past engagements. It can feel a little awkward. So you might not, I would put it up when you feel you have some things to say and some things to put there. Okay. As you get more advanced, you might have a formal speaking kit, which I have. People can go and download the speaking kit right off my website. And I've heard from some folks that they've liberally stolen the format, just copied it, which is the greatest compliment. By all means, steal any ideas you find in that speaking kit. It just cuts down on requests you don't want. I know you're probably not there yet, Sarah, but one day you will be. And so it helps.
And what's in the speaking kit?
It's a long list of the topics and workshops that I offer by beginning, intermediate, advanced. It also has like terms and fees, like what people can expect if they want me to come to their conference or if they want me to speak with their organization. So it sets the ground rules. It has testimonials. It has pictures of me speaking, and it tells people how to contact me. So, I can tell when someone asks
like an analog to a media kit.
Yeah, precisely. So I can definitely tell when someone reaches out to me if they've actually looked at the speaking kit, which is another good, it's just a really good way to gauge, the professionalism of whoever's reaching out. And then finally, I feel like I made a big jump when I recorded myself presenting a keynote in person. And then I posted the entirety of that keynote talk onto YouTube. Now that took a lot of work. Like I had to invest in like a good camera that I could set up on a tripod. Then I had to edit it myself and intersperse the slides with me speaking. Obviously there were audio considerations because the camera was very far away from where I was actually speaking at the lectern. I sorted out all those issues, but it was totally worth it.
Okay.
So I would say once you're interested in getting into paid conference speaking, like where you're speaking at, let's say the annual Writer's Digest conference, and they're paying all your expenses and an honorarium. I think that's where having that sort of video is super helpful. And so I'll just, before we get to the Q&A, I'll end on like what I think is the ultimate achievement, breaking into paid conference speaking. Some things to keep in mind is that most events plan out 1 year in advance, sometimes more. So you need to be kind of checking the site or looking for that formal pitch or proposal process, which they'll likely have. If you don't see it, I wouldn't be shy about contacting them and asking when they're going to open it up, or, you know, what are their expectations for pitches. Study past programming. Who were the past speakers? Because you can use that to pitch a better session that's more likely to get accepted. If you know anyone who has spoken, especially friends and colleagues, ask them about the experience, ask for a testimonial or a recommendation. But by and large, throughout this entire process of trying to get the paid gig, you have to show you understand the audience, which is everything we covered at the beginning. And if you're able to market and promote the conference, that's going to be somewhat motivating for the event, because they do like speakers that have their own reach and can help drive registrations. So if you have it, you don't have to have them, but if you do have them, you mention them.
What this makes me realize is that I gained a lot of experience with tuna because of MeowFest. I wasn't a paid speaker there, but I went through the pitch. I did a video session, a couple of video sessions. And it's like, oh, okay, so this is a skill that I have. I just have to transfer it.
Yes. Okay, so that's the end of my formal talking points. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we go into the Q&A. If you want to be next on Business Clinic, you can go to my website, look for the Business Clinic tab underneath online classes. You'll find a link to the application form. It's totally free, but obviously you have to be very public with your problems and agree to discuss them with me. I also run Sunday business sermons. The next one's going to be in January, on January 8th. It's going to be about the creator economy with guest Michael Evans. I'm really looking forward to that one. Okay, so I'm going to stop the share. And Sarah, why don't I pause here before I get to attendee questions and ask, what questions do you have, or what are you left feeling like, I'm feeling anxious about this?
I'm realizing this is a longer process than I anticipated because I'm thinking, oh, I'd like to clear up some space, but if I'm going to be creating stuff and doing it for free and trying to pitch locally, that it might take longer than I had anticipated.
Yes. Something I didn't mention is that you can really apply some rocket fuel to this process if you just simply know, especially locally or regionally, if you know someone who is actively involved in this space in any way and can help with introductions, recommendations. Like if you know a professor teaching at Simon Fraser, like I happen to know that university is close to you and they have a writing and publishing program. So just, try to look for the quick, easy wins if you can, but I know you're in a bit of, I don't want to say you're isolated, but you are in a...
I am. I mean, Simon Fraser is about 100 miles from me, but there's an entire ocean. Yeah, there's the Georgia Strait between us. And the local university, I can certainly look into it. I do know some editors here who might be able to, connect me, or at least I can ask, hey, do you know of any place that's looking?
Right.
I have to say, this is one of the problems with leaving Twitter, is I feel like I'm even more isolated now.
Yeah. Well, you could focus online first, and obviously, you know me as somebody who can refer you or introduce
Yes.
you to various chapters. But I mean, I wouldn't encourage you to look at local and regional opportunities if I didn't think it would be hugely useful.
Yeah.
And I know this is also, I guess, 100 miles away, but there's also Surrey Writers Conference that's
Yeah.
hugely valuable networking. Like even if you weren't speaking, it could be very useful to attend that, just for the potential leads you would get.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. This has been really, I do feel like it's a kick for me to get started,
Good. Good. All right, so I'm going to go through the Q&A here, try to get to as many as I can. Diana's wondering about the techie stuff that's needed. So we did cover this. I hope, Diana, that we covered it in a way that was useful to you. I think that, part of it is just having at least Apple earbuds for the audio, having a webcam in your computer the default webcam should be fine. And then having a little bit of experience dealing with videos so you can set up your initial examples for people of your teaching style. So Loom, I know I've heard of that before, and that was recommended in the chat, and I think it's fairly intuitive to use. Carrie says, I have teaching experience in one field, my past job, but want to get opportunities teaching in another, her current job. Do I include the previous unrelated experience teaching? I think I would, yes, mainly because you learn how to be a better teacher regardless of topic the more that you do it. So I think it is relevant. An anonymous attendee is asking, I've been in a writing class this fall and it's shown me some strengths of what I could teach or consult on. How do you lean into those strengths while honoring the teacher who showed you the way to those strengths? Usually if I'm sharing something in a class that I feel has been strongly influenced by someone else, if I'm like the XYZ rule, for example, from Marion Roach Smith, I give credit where credit is due. So I think that should be fine. Now, if you're doing something like, I don't know, let's say you read Story by Robert McKee and you're like, I want to teach a class on everything that it has done for me, or then you would just, and I think there's probably space for a class about that for people who don't want to read that book. And you could just say, all of the secrets of Stories Robert McKee packaged for you in 30 minutes. I think you could totally do something like that if what you have to teach is heavily, heavily influenced by a single person or book. And I'll admit right here that the very first classes I taught were based on Writer's Digest books that I had read or edited. It's not that I had that personal knowledge, it's that I had read so much on the topic. And so I definitely, credited those sources when I was teaching. Someone's wondering how to determine your rates when you reach out. So I skipped over that really quickly about, with your initial stuff, you're probably going to be reaching out and doing it for free or very cheap, like really small honorariums. I think that you determine your rates a lot based on reputation, reach, demand. So when you're starting out, you don't have a lot of leverage, in other words. I do have a separate YouTube, it's a Sunday sermon that talks about speaking, and I talk about negotiation and how to think about setting your rates or how to know what to charge. But I will say, for the writing and publishing community specifically, they're not known for paying large amounts. And by large amounts, I mean anything that's well into the four figures. It's pretty unlikely unless you're a keynote speaker. We're talking about hundreds of dollars for average conference appearances, unless you're teaching like an extra masterclass where you're like getting a cut of the revenue on the class or something. But that's pretty unusual unless you're a big name. Sarah, do you have anything that any qualms, any worries in that regard about rates?
No, I mean, I was just thinking, is this something I want to pursue, given that it's a long build.
It is.
And I was also, this is a little bit random, but back to your McKee example, I actually was able to take his workshop in '93, and I do recommend the book over the workshop. It's like all the bright stuff without the insults.
Ah, yes. I've heard he's quite a character.
Yeah, in terms of rates, I have sort of my own process around figuring out what feels right. But it helps to know that, okay, it's just, this is not going to be clearing up big chunks of time and money for me right away.
Yeah.
That's help, you know, managing expectations. That's helpful.
Right. Jan wonders if you need to ask permission when showing an example from a published book. By and large, no. I mean, I'm assuming, you know, an example that could fit on a slide, we're only talking about hundreds of words. Even if you were to show a few examples from the same book, it's still like extremely likely to fall under fair use. So I have yet to see any concerns in all of the classes I've hosted about permissions. You would have to be doing something pretty dramatic to get in trouble. And also, since it's for the purposes of teaching or education, that's part of what fair use is about, is being able to use materials to educate. So I probably wouldn't be concerned unless you're like showing, like if you're like reading an entire book aloud during the webinar from front to back, yes, that's a problem. Please do not do that. Colleen says, I coach individual clients inside work before addressing the writing process. So I'm not sure it would be a class. For example, working with someone becoming more and more disabled with MS. After telling me about all her exterior issues she faces and has faced, I told her her book needs to be about what she's experiencing inside, grief and loss. We explored those things extensively before she started writing what I call zero draft. That sounds fascinating, Colleen. I don't know that I have any particular guidance for you, but it's very possible there's a class in there. Greg's asking what mic I have. It's not a USB mic. That's probably the most important thing you need to know. It's actually attached to like a sound box. I don't know the formal term for it, on my computer, which then plugs into the computer. So meaning it's a higher quality mic. It's like an Audio Technica, like 2035 or something like that. So it costs maybe $150 plus the little box that's sitting on my desk. So this would be more akin to the sort of microphone that maybe a musician or a podcaster would be likely to use. I don't know that it's what I recommend, generally speaking, for people, because it's more complicated than necessary. But since I do this for a living, make money at teaching online, I felt like it merited the upgrade.
There was, I think it was a business sermon or a different webinar where you outlined the tech you use. I think I still have them on my Amazon wish list. But
for a while it was out of stock. I think this was during the pandemic. I don't know if that's still the case, but I bought this so long ago now that I would expect there's a new model out. Melissa says, I'm a former teacher, published author. I'm finishing a year-long class by donation. Now that the year's done, I'd like to expand to 2 paid classes. My skills are helping first-time book writers finish their first drafts and decide where and how to publish. Small group, 4 writers, weekly meeting on Zoom, 12 weeks at a time. I've promoted the class on Facebook, but didn't get enough interest for a second class. I've restarted my newsletter, but how can I market better? Well, I would say it really depends on where your strengths are. This is another issue we didn't talk about, which is if you, Sarah, like if you were to start developing classes that you just want to teach on your own, you don't pitch, you don't look for a partner. Of course, if you're just going to do it on your own, that puts the marketing and promotion burden on you. Right. So, I mean, the way that I do it is through my email newsletter. That's like 90% of it.
And you have a large list, though.
I do. It's an enormous list. So I don't have to advertise. I also have instructors who can spread the word in various ways, some better than others, but I don't judge instructors based on their their marketing power. Some places do, so you have to be aware of that.
Yeah.
Social media is the big one for a lot of folks, but this is tricky because if you just go out and do a hard sell on social media for your class, you're not likely to get many people interested. So you have to offer something valuable. Like you have to share like one of those aha moments, like a 1 to 2 minute aha moment, however befits you. Like it could be a series of images on Instagram. It could be an Instagram reel. It could be a blog post. So you have to tempt people with something and you do have to give a little bit of the good stuff away in order so that they're like, if I was helped by this small 1-minute video, imagine what's going to be packed into that class. So that's the sort of effect that you're going after. And then once, hopefully you're going to generate word of mouth and get students, past students, existing students to help make referrals. I know that some people have affiliate programs. I don't, but they have affiliate programs where people who recommend, they get a kickback, a portion of the class registration fee if they successfully refer. Now, affiliate programs are not, I don't find them particularly easy to manage, but there are many tools out there that help streamline. But that's another thing you could think about. And then Allison mentions in answer to Melissa that there's a snowball effect where teaching one webinar means some people now know you and they'll come to the next one. And I couldn't agree more.
That's a great point.
I would say by far, the biggest lure is often teaching something for free. And if you do that through Zoom, you're getting their email address. And so as long as, you respect the use of that email address, you can use that for marketing purposes. And let people know about future offerings that you have after they've enjoyed your free thing.
I use Acuity, which I think you do too.
I do.
And
yes.
I have an intake question for discovery calls for free consults. And at the bottom, it says, would you like to join my mailing list? And I would say 99% of people say yes.
Yes. Yes. So. Allison wants to make sure Sarah sees this. Thank you. The Hippocamp Creative Nonfiction Conference is very welcoming and a great place to teach and connect with authors. So,
thank you, Allison. I've heard of it. It's come around so often to me, but I will look more into it.
It's held in Pennsylvania, and I can second that it's a very welcoming place. I've spoken there once. It's run by some really great people. And I believe they do have a formal pitch and proposal process, if I'm not mistaken. Heather asks, what if you have extensive teaching experience, but not the website? Is a website mandatory when you're starting out? Boy, it's hard not to have one, really hard. I would say maybe the solution is to use an easy system for getting up at least a landing page. So Card is the one that I send people to. I've just put in the link into the chat. It'll get you a single page up. You can say something about yourself. You can actually even accept payments through a Card site if you pay. You can get it for free, but if you pay $20 a year, I think you can start accepting payments through a Card site. So I would put up something. Some people are able to get away with like using a link tree, like a link tree that's off of their Instagram or wherever they're active on social media. But I still think it would be far better to have your own website or start a Substack, and that can be your website. I don't know, something. All right. Greg is asking you, Sarah, what would your absolute favorite course to teach be?
I think the finding your flow, however it's phrased, practices for getting into flow. So flipping that around, writing better and faster in half the time would be the benefit, even though that makes me cringe.
Yes,
because I've worked in marketing for a while, like as a writer, and like, but I get it.
I know
that would be my ideal would be, as with Tuna, to bridge my writing and editing expertise with the platform I'm building.
Yeah. I understand the cringe
and I
factor,
think that might be Greg, my former client. So hi, Greg.
Oh, That's very sweet. I just wanted to note, I understand the cringe factor. Like, I don't want to oversell or overpromise or get into the smarmy side of like titling a class. Like, I hope I would never run a class that was something like how to sell 6 figures overnight, you know, or something kind of crazy. I'm always trying to lower people's expectations on success, not increase them, because that's the reality. But you do need to think in terms of benefit, and it has to be something you're comfortable with, obviously. But writing faster, or, you know, I don't know if there would be other words for that. You can check your thesaurus,
Well,
or ask the chat GPT bot now what.
I mean, the positioning line for Living the Mess now is inner peace for overthinkers. So
that's a good
given that most
tagline.
writers, thank you. It took a long time to get there. So most writers are overthinkers. You know, we just are. So I'd have to percolate some more. Nothing's coming up. Right.
Greg has a follow-up question about what you mean by flow.
Flow is that state where time just flies by. Words are coming out that you're not even aware of the words coming out. It's like, it feels like there's a river coming through. Even when I was young, I used to say, my best writing goes from here to my hand. It kind of bypasses the brain. So that's what flow means to me, is being in a place where everything is just flowing out. And then I put, you know, my critical thinking back on when I go to revise. But it's about getting out of your own way at the keyboard.
I could certainly see a class that was something like the power of flow, getting out of your way at the keyboard, just repeating what you just said.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Because I would really like to do something like that.
Yeah. And Greg says, that sounds fabulous. Okay, so Helen says, Jane, you have a wonderful speaking voice. Why, thank you. I'm a former college biology educator, now a freelance writer since 2006. I've taught some creative writing classes at the community college. I love being in front of people, but I'm fearful that my Southern accent won't translate well over any webinar. Do you have any suggestions? Yasmin mentions, I have a Southern accent and it's never been a problem. Many find it charming. I would agree.
Yes, I agree too.
Allison mentions, for women, it helps to lower pitch just a tad or set the mic on a dark tone.
Or be Elizabeth Holmes and move your voice like this.
But she says that's not really an accent issue. I guess it's it's another issue. Anyway, something I found really helpful, Helen, I don't think you have anything to worry about, but I will add, for those of you who are thinking about if you want to improve your speaking voice, or you want, I don't know, you just want to be articulate. There are 2 people I love listening to recorded that help me think more about how I speak. One of them is Laurie Anderson. Listen to record, like she does storytelling on her albums. Listen to Laurie Anderson tell stories. Oh my God. And just mimic her and you'll immediately become a better speaker. And then the other person I love listening to, sadly passed many decades ago, is Alan Watts. He also has an incredible speaking voice and way of teaching. So those 2, if you're just looking for inspiration or to hear people who are very talented at delivery, those are the 2 I would go to.
I just wanted to add, for accents, I always find closed captioning really helpful. So as long as you have closed captioning, because there are times when, let's say, someone's from a really different region, it can help. But again, I think for a North American audience, Southern accents are sweet.
Susan says, Sarah, if you're on Vancouver Island, she says, Elder Hostel is constantly looking for new classes.
Yeah. I think the local university has elder classes. So thank you. Thank you, Susan.
And then there are some recommendations in the chat for those of you who want to practice on vocal or accent issues. There's a lot of YouTube guidance on this, and I can second that. There is a ton that's out there. Okay, well, I think we got through all the questions. I think I hope I spotted most of the things happening in chat. But thank you all for coming today. And thank you especially, Sarah, for opening yourself up to be examined. And
well, thank you so much for doing these and for all the free content you offer. It's amazing. And thank you for everyone who showed up.
This, just to remind everyone, this will be posted on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com/@JaneFriedman and you will find all of the past clinics. This one will probably get posted late today or early tomorrow. Thank you all. And go ahead.
I am now going to go ahead and work on something about how to get out of your own head or how to stop. I'll figure out something, but I just wanted to say that's what I'm taking away now.
Perfect. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day or evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.